And welcome to Madness and More. Today, this is lesson 3A. There are two parts to lesson 3. There's A and B. So today we'll be covering control flow. So we'll be learning to make decisions with if and else in Java. So if you haven't already watched our last video, make sure to do so because it is important to understand that lesson before you continue on to this lesson. So the link to the past video is going to be found in the description box. And after you learn this lesson, you can also access a practice worksheet in our description box, which you can email to madnessandmore@gmail.com to get your answer key. And if you have any questions throughout this lesson, you can also email them to madnessandmore@gmail.com. So let's get started. Okay, so let's look at what control flow is. It controls which code runs or doesn't run. So programs normally run top to bottom, but control flow will decide which piece of code you want to run and which piece you don't want to run. And it allows decision making in the code. In this episode, we'll just be looking at if, and else. So just to give you an example, let's get a format of code. So let's say we have this squiggly line of code, and then we want to make a decision in our program. So I'll have an if statement. The if statement will have a condition inside. So this can be any condition. And then we'll close that line off. And then we'll have a block of code which tells our program that, hey, if this condition, if this condition here is satisfied, then you want to execute the code in this block. Then you'll have an else statement. Let's say we have else. We won't do else if right now. We'll go into that in a few moments. This is just to understand the organization of conditions. So we'll close this off. Else doesn't use any other conditions. It's just to say, hey, if this if condition is not met, then you'll go on to do this set of code. And then we have a block in the else. We'll close off the else. And so what this block is saying is that it's saying, hey, if let's say this condition is not met, you'll just jump over to this else statement and you'll do whatever is in this block. So it's affecting the order of how your code runs in. Normally, if you don't have an if condition, what your program will do is that it'll jump from this line of code here right to the next line, execute whatever the next line is trying to say, and then it'll go to the next line. But because of this if condition, it doesn't necessarily do what is next, which is this block. It will do whatever is going to, which should run based on your decisions. So now let's look at Boolean values. So Boolean can equal true or false. Boolean is a data type, as we explored in the last video. So it can only store true or false. It's used for decision making, and here are some examples. So let's look at what each of these mean. So score equals 100 basically means, hey, does score equal 100? True or false? And what this condition means is age greater than or equal to 16? True or false? So if it is greater than or equal to 16, then you'll return true, or your Boolean variable will store true, and otherwise it will store false. Here are some comparison operators. which we explored earlier. So this is also in our last video, but just to look at it again, this segment means it's equal to, you'll probably use this the most. This is not equal to, this is greater than, less than, greater or equal to, and less than equal to. And then these are some logical operators. So this in code, if you're writing this in a condition, means and. So let's say we have an if statement, and then we have condition in here. We have this and this need to be satisfied in order to run the block of code in here, in this box. So in the middle, you'll just say and, and double and, okay. And then let's say you want this condition or this condition, and then you'll run this line of code. Well, in that case, you won't use this. You will be using 2 lines. And then this would be not, and you can use these to combine conditions. And then we'll explore what an if statement is for. So an if statement checks a condition, and it runs code if true and skips it if it was false, like we explored earlier. And so if else basically means that if runs the condition when it's true, and then let's say the condition is not true, it'll jump to your else statement or your else if statement and run whatever block of code is in that else condition. And only one block will run. It won't do that. The first block runs and the second one runs too. And else if is used for multiple choices. So let's say you have one condition. So we have one condition. Now this condition hasn't been satisfied. So the block of code here did not run. Well, that's okay. I have another condition I want to check. And I want to see if that condition is satisfied or not. So I'll go else if that's a condition. And if this condition is satisfied, I want to run this block of code. And so the first true condition will run. So the block inside the first true condition will run. And it'll check from top to bottom. So this will be checked first, and then this will be checked. So some common mistakes that we see. The biggest mistake that I always see and sometimes make myself is using just one equal sign when I'm checking for equal in my code. Make sure if you're checking true or false, you're using 2. Forgetting the curly braces and using a semicolon instead is a really big mistake. Sometimes we see overlapping and sometimes wrong condition orders, but those aren't as common as forgetting the braces and using one equal sign instead of 2. So let's do a practice scenario. So we could do any of these 3. You could do if a number is positive, negative, or 0. We could do can someone drive or not, and passing or failing grade. So if you notice, this would be more of a else if kind of format. It'll have else if. This one just will have an if statement. Honestly, you could just say if greater than 18, then equal to true, can drive, and if let's say it is not, you could just say else false, but you don't really need that because it's can someone drive. passing or failing grade would be more of an else, if else kind of situation. So let's practice the positive slash negative slash zero so that we can get practice with all three kinds. All right. Okay, so I've now transitioned over to Eclipse. I created a project, a Java project named Control Flow dash lesson 3A, and inside that I have created a lesson 3A runner with main. If you need help starting a new project, you can look over at the last episode or the episode before that. Okay, so now looking deeper into if statements, we first need a variable to compare with. So I will make the variable an int data type. You can have it as a double depending on the number that you are storing. I'm going to name my variable num, and I'm just going to have it equal to 2. Okay, so now for our if statements, our first condition will be exploring if the number is negative. So if num is less than 0 would mean that it's negative. We'll end that condition with a curly bracket or curly brace, and inside that we'll say what happens if this condition is satisfied. So we'll just have a print statement, print system.out.print ln. We'll just say the number is negative. And make sure you add your quotes in. So now I want you to pause the video and write an else if condition. Make sure that you end it with a semicolon, and Eclipse will just have your curly brace closing for you. Okay, so now let's look at the else if. So we'll have else if, and then we need another condition inside the else if. So this time we'll just be checking if the number is 0. You could also check if it's positive. So let's say that you decided to check if the number is equal to 0. You'll say number is equal to 0, and then you'll go into your block of code. But let's say that you wanted to program it to see if it was positive. You'll say it's greater than 0. And then we'll go curly brace inside it. We will say system dot out dot print ln. The number is positive. And it is, well, it is already ended for us with the semicolon and then the curly brace. So then we could just go enter, and this time we'll be writing our else statement. You could write an else if to see if it's equal to 0, and that would work. It would logically make more sense to make this statement equal to 0, and then say the number is 0. But it doesn't really matter because if we have the less than 0, greater than 0 already covered, your else statement will be if it is will be true if it's equal to 0. So let's say system dot out dot print ln. The number is 0. Semicolon, and that will be our program. So let's run this. So it says the number is positive. Now, what if we change the number? What if we make it -2? let's run it and see if that works, if our program works for negative accurately. And it does. It says the number is negative, and then we'll test 0. And it'll work for 0 as well. So you'll see that this is how the syntax for if, else, if, and else look like. Now we have a mini project. This is like a guess checker. So you're going to ask the user for a number, and then we'll compare that to a secret number that will be in our code, and you'll use if and else only. So here are the requirements. So you're going to store a secret number. You're going to get the user guess. So you'll use the input statement that we learned last time in the prior video. So it will help you brush up on your prior skills. And then we will say if the number that the user inserted, the guess, is too high, too low, or correct. So just thinking about it, right? Since there are 3 different things that we need to kind of check, we could say that we will need an else if with the if statement that we need. So that is a bit of a hint. Pause the video, and then once you're finished with your mini project, come back for the solution. Okie dokie. So hopefully you're back from your project now, and you have attempted it. So remember, a quick way to collect input from a user is you'll import the Java scanner, and then we have our secret number here. We have it as 7, and then this is setting up the variable for scanner, and then here is where you are collecting your user's guess. So after that input, you'll see input.close, which we didn't use in the prior lesson, but it's a good practice. You don't need it for this short piece of code, but if you're using input in a bigger project, it is good practice. So we'll run the code with this, and then we'll remove it and see if the code still runs. And then we will have our if statement. So this will really decide what our output results is. So let's run the code. We'll go run as Java application. Okay. So enter my guess. So I'll say my guess is 2. Enter. It says it's too low. That's what we want. Now I will just comment this line of code out. There we go. Then we will run. It asked me to enter my guess just like I wanted. This time I'll say 100. And it says too high. So it does work without that line of code. It's just a good practice to have. I'll run it again, and this time we'll get it right. We'll say 7, and it'll say correct. So that's the little gist of it. If you want a practice, you can always look down in the description box, and we will have practice. This time there's a worksheet, so once you complete your worksheet, you can email it to mathnessandmore@gmail.com. You can also email any questions over to us or put them in the comment box below. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It really supports the channel and allows us to bring more amazing content to you. And if you ever have any suggestions on any content or anything that you would like to see, you can also email us your requests for that. Thank you for watching. And please don't miss our next video, which will be lesson 3B about for loops and while loops.